So the first T in trust is going to stand for transparent. And transparent means being see-through, being your true self, not holding anything back. So I did an Instagram an Instagram question thing last week to just have people respond and say what trust means to them. And I think about 80% of the responses said something along the lines of being able to be my true self and be accepted and embraced for who that is. So transparency is not an easy thing for a lot of people. I don't know a lot of people in my life that are just super transparent with me from the first time that I've met them. But it's a very valuable thing. And it's not something to be taken for granted if you have a relationship where you're able to be transparent with someone. But I want y'all also to remember when we talk about trust, you can't make other people trustworthy. But you can understand for yourself what it means to be trustworthy and better understand how God is trustworthy and how to approach God and trust Him better. Because God already knows you and He loves you as you are. So transparency with God is still not an easy thing. I don't think transparency with anyone is an easy thing. But God already knows us and knows everything about us. So He already sees past. Sometimes we put on front, sometimes we put on masks, sometimes we pretend to be people that we aren't, or pretend to like things that we don't like to please other people. But God sees past all of the fronts we put on, and He sees our true self. He sees us as He made us. He sees us as we are. So we can always come to Him with transparency, even though sometimes in prayer it's still not easy to be transparent. But I love how in the Bible there are so many instances, in the New Testament especially, where Jesus just knew people. For instance, the first disciples that He called to follow Him, He basically just He called their name and He looked at them and He said their name and he said, follow me. And then they dropped everything and they went. So God isn't just a God who makes us and then steps back. God knows us intimately and wants us to know Him better too. So He already knows everything about us. But I'm going to read you guys a quick story. It's a pretty familiar one. It's the story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector. You know, Zacchaeus was a wee little man, if you heard that song growing up. But it's in Luke chapter 19. It says, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and he was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be with the guests of the sinner. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay them back 4 times the amount. Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. So, tax collectors were not highly looked upon people in Bible times. They had a tendency to cheat people out of a lot of money. And so that's probably what a lot of other people would have seen and did see in Zacchaeus during that. But Jesus looked at Zacchaeus and He didn't just see his titles. He didn't just see the bad things that he had done, the ways that he had hurt other people. He saw through that transparently, and he saw the fact that Zacchaeus wanted to know Jesus, but he also wanted to turn that part of his life around, because he said that he would give back 4 times the amount that he had cheated anyone. So that's just one small example of how God sees past facades, and He sees past smiles when they're not really smiles, and He sees us for who we are, and He sees us transparently. So we can be transparent with God because we know that He already knows us and loves us as we are. And I think we have a tendency to think that when we pray, which is so funny to me, I do it too, but when we pray, we still have to have that front up of only happy prayers or something. But there's Psalms and Proverbs full of examples of people crying out in anger, crying out in pain and sadness and desperation to God. And God wants all the sides of us. He doesn't just want the side we put on. Maybe it's different when you go to church than it is when you're at home. He wants everything. He wants all of us, each part of us, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we can be transparent with God. We can cry out when we're in pain, when we're sad about something, when we're hurt by someone. We can tell God about all of the things that we struggle with because he already knows, but he wants us to be transparent with him. And also, I think that we can learn a lot through being transparent with God on how to be transparent with others. And it should never be for our own gain, but sometimes in order to strengthen a relationship, you have to talk about the hard things and the things that you've been through that weren't all that pretty to really get to know somebody better. And that just builds your level of trust that you have with someone. I don't want you to take this lesson or a message and then just go out and like trust everybody with every single detail of your life. That's not really how trust works. But I think we can all work a little bit more on being transparent with the people that we care about, even though it is hard. And sometimes maybe we've been hurt by doing that in the past. But first of all, know that you can always be transparent with God in prayer and just talking to him in your life because he already sees it all and he knows you and he chooses you anyway. But also, transparency builds a really strong foundation for relationships, and it's not something that should be taken lightly when it happens. Because when you're able to be your true self with somebody else and be accepted for it, that's the goal right there in relationships, right? You're not going to get that with every relationship you have, but when you do have it in a relationship, it's so worth it. And when you do have it in your relationship with God, it's so worth it too. So I want to encourage you, think about transparency this week. Think about people in your life that you can be your true self with, and think about if you're always your true self when you talk to God and if you're always transparent with him. So, love you guys.